So, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the remarkable scenes from Sinead O'Connor's funeral yesterday, along with the royal family's plans to commemorate the death of the Queen last year. But I want to take us inside to page 20, where I'm furious. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, but Rishi Sunak has been asked to make sure, it looks like in this story, right? Rishi Sunak has been asked to make sure that his MPs turn up to work. And he's just sort of shrugged and said, nah. Am I right? What's happened here? What's the story about?
Well, this is a story of Nadine Dorries, who some people might know from reality TV. She's probably more well-known.
You won't know her from the House of Commons because she hasn't been there for ages.
And I do love the headline because it does really sum up the situation. She is like the dinner party guest who doesn't know when it's time to leave. She announced in June that she was quitting Parliament.
With immediate effect.
With immediate effect, indeed. She didn't get the period. She threw her toys out of the pram, but she's still there. She hadn't spoken in Parliament for longer than a year. I think she last was in April the 7th. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she's still there. She's constituents in Flitwick. They've all called for her to go. She is still there. She last voted in April, definitely. But she is still there, spending our money, taking our money for the square root of not doing very much. Now, the interesting thing is that even, listen, I have no time whatsoever for the rather reprehensible immigration minister, Robert Jenrick, but even he has called for her to go on TV this morning.
He hasn't talked about to go on TV, we should say. He was on TV. She's already on TV. She's on GB News.
I didn't want to, but you can.
She's on GBBs. So this is a story about the fact that Number 10 was asked, are you going to do anything about this? And the answer was, well, it's up to the voters of Mid Bedfordshire to decide who they want to represent them. Okay, well, give them the vote then, Darren. Why isn't Rishi Sunak calling the general election so the people of, or even a by-election, which he has the power to do? He has the power to eject one of his own MPs, so that to give the people that chance, because at the moment they don't have the right to recall her for anything.
No, they don't. And this is the thing that, I mean, we're smiling about it, but you know, the serious aspect of this is that it's symbolic of the lack of accountability for this government and its ministers past and present. We saw Boris Johnson not turning up for work and going off on holidays as and when he wanted to. We saw the conduct of the reprehensible Lee Anderson yesterday. His comments have been called interesting, foul-mouthed and salty. They're racist. And yet there is zero accountability for him. You look at Rishi Sunak, you ask the question about what he's doing. He is a lame duck. He's a glove puppet. He is not there to keep anyone in line because he can't. He is not in control of the party. He is just there as a figurehead, which is the reason why Sir Chris Bryant has been looking to change the rules so that if she can actually be required to attend Parliament, and then they can look at ways that they can actually affect her removal, because you cannot have a situation where a former cabinet minister, an MP, simply doesn't turn up for work. And remember, this is the party that talks about work-shy layabouts all over the country, sponging off the system. What are they doing?
Exactly, and she's getting rather more money than the average asylum seeker does to get through the week. So what do you think, everybody? Do you think Nadine Dorries' version of immediate effect should actually apply, and if she doesn't resign, someone should resign for her? Do you think that the dictionary and the word immediate needs to be redefined and rewritten in order to take into account that it doesn't apply to Nadine Dorries? Mike says, to be fair, if MPs could be recalled just because they didn't do the job they were elected for, Parliament would be a wilderness. It does seem rather that Rishi Sunak is in the charge of his party, as opposed to, party's in charge of him rather than the other way around. But basically, Nadine Dorries, the wannabe celebrity of this parish, hasn't done the job of an MP for a year. The chairman of her local council, I think it's called Flitwick, has begged her to hold a constituency surgery, which he says hasn't happened. She hasn't spoken in the House of Commons for more than a year and hasn't voted since April. Now, I happen to know that MPs on all sides would rather she wasn't there causing a fuss. As you said, Darren, Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, said she ought to go. But Rishi doesn't want, let's face it, another by-election where her 24,000 majority would end up in the bin pretty quickly. As a massive protest vote against the government. Now, they do seem to by-elections always go against the government, and it's just not indicative of what happens in a general election. But are the Tories really just hoping that if they hold out for another year to a general election, that somehow everyone in Mid-Bedfordshire would come around to the idea that the Tories are great with another year with Nadine Dorries as their not MP?
Yeah, and I can't see that happening at all. I mean, obviously, we've seen very recently that the Tories are very fortunate not to lose Uxbridge, Boris Johnson's seat, because of that protest vote against the ULEZ, which really hurt Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, quite badly. But as you say, I think this is far more of a tap-in. I'm kind of conflicted in some ways, you know, Susie, because there is a part of me that believes that the government would rather this particular story continue to dominate, to kind of take the heat off the Anderson comments, which are self-explanatory for every decent person, and really, really did characterize what we've all known about the party, the Conservative Party, for quite some time. And so part of me just thinks that there is an element within the Tory party that thinks, well, let's just let this fester. Let's let everyone talk about it on shows just like this. But I did like what I saw from Chris Bryant this morning, because he's saying, look, let's recall her to Parliament. Let's have her sanctioned if she hasn't voted by, I think it's October the 26th. And that's going to mark 6 months since she last did. And he wants to table a motion that will actually get her in front of MPs, and it would be considered a contempt of Parliament if she were to refuse to do so. And that would be punishable with a suspension. I think we need to get some mechanics in place so that we can actually deal about it. Yeah, you know, MPs on all sides can be angry, and commentators like us can be, but I think action is needed. Now, just to say, Nadine's been on I think she's been on Twitter saying that Sir Chris is trying to flog his book, and he is. Let's not kid ourselves. He is trying to do that. But the facts are that what he has put forward is what we should see, because at the moment, MPs are taking the public for a ride because of the archaic system that exists inside Westminster.
Well, it's not just that. It's also the fact, I mean, Nadine's had plenty of books that she's flogging. In fact, she's spending all the time writing that she's dealing with her constituents. And they're not very good books for that. Mike says, Nadine has now been resigning with immediate effect for longer than Liz Truss was Prime Minister. Probably some time ago, Mike. But it's the fact as well that we've got a zombie government that just isn't really... It's not fit for anything. That's why it's reheating ideas about Ascension Island and sending migrants to a place that they would have to rebuild from the bottom up and send a load of concrete to first. It would cost billions. It would cost £1 million a head to send migrants to Ascension Island, and yet they decide to reheat it and re-mention it because everything else is going so horribly wrong. They have Lee Anderson out there saying his stuff, and they think, well, actually, there's quite a few people who probably agree with him, so we won't bother to knock him down. John says, you can be sure those MPs have had their jabs. Different law for them, bloody Tories. I don't know that they will have had their jabs, actually, John. I think that's probably not right, but I can understand your attitude. It is just a case that the government is sort of limping on. Everyone wants a general election. Everyone wants it done and over. They're absolute toast. But they do seem to be holding on for the last year's salary, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I do feel sorry for those voters in Flitwick, because, you know, you do have a situation where you have Nadine Dorries, who's doing everything but her job. And as I said before, the thing that really does stick in the craw is the fact that the Tories are the first to criticise people they believe to be sponging from the system, taking taxpayers' money, a drain on the resources of this country, and yet they are taking exorbitant amounts of money, the money we pay them, our money, to live the life that they want to. And then when she does, as she is at the moment, she'll resign. She's resigned and she is working for a TV channel, and she'll go on reality TV shows and they'll do all sorts of things. And we've seen that so many times. They wreck our lives and then they go on to areas in the media where they can make more money and have some fun. I saw Hancock on TikTok making an idiot of himself yesterday. He's already been on in the jungle. These people are making money after wrecking our lives or backing policy that wrecks our lives. And yet we are supposed to be sympathetic or understanding when they don't turn up for work. It's actually a disgrace. And I think, although I do think it's taken the heat off the situation regarding Lee Anderson, I think it should be in the public domain, because I think the system should be changed. I think Sir Chris was talking about something in a motion in 1801, that you had to get permission to absent yourself from Parliament. Well, let's see her go before Parliament and actually account for what has been a shameful dereliction of duty.
Yeah, there is certainly some arguments to be had. I would have thought about that, and that the government has the power to eject one of their own MPs and force a by-election if it wants to look like it's in charge of its MPs. It has the right to censure or remove the whip. And as Chris Bryant is proceeding with this motion, he wants to try and put this motion down in Parliament for them to recall her to Parliament. I mean, she could just turn up and have a vote and then put it off. It's not difficult.
Well, that's the system, isn't it? That's a problem.
That's what she could do. But if she didn't, and they did have a vote on it, the Tories would probably abstain, and then Labour and the rest would carry it, and she could be suspended or investigated or whatever, and then potentially suspended for more than 10 days, and therefore force a by-election. But that would take months, and we're pretty much at a general election by that point. So it's all a bit ridiculous. There should be a better system of recall, which I could have sworn one MP called Nadine Dorries once argued an awful lot for in the House of Commons. We shall see, won't we? Anyway,